for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
Boldly proclaiming the truth of the risen Christ. This is Ancient Faith Radio, timeless Christianity, 24 hours a day.
O Lord and vanquisher of Hades, greatest protector, we, your creatures and servants, offer you praise, for you have delivered us from eternal death. As you have boundless compassion, save us from all calamity. As we cry, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on me.
This is Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich, a live listener call-in show where we share the stories of everyday Orthodox people as we get to know the members of the body of Christ. Join the conversation. We invite you to call in with questions at 1-855-AF-RADIO, 1-855-237-2346.
Welcome to Everyday Orthodox. It is Sunday, June 14th, 2020, and we are live on Ancient Faith Radio. I'm Elisa Bielatich. Welcome to Everyday Orthodox. We're here every Sunday talking to another Everyday Orthodox person. And so you never know really who's going to be on the show. Maybe it's someone who's done all kinds of amazing things. Maybe it's the lady who sits next to you in church and bakes the prosphora. It could be anyone. And I find that Orthodox people are very interesting people. We come from a lot of different lands. We have found the church in different ways. Some of us, of course, grew up in the faith, but a lot of us are converts to the faith and just sort of coming in. And in addition to that, we have all of these different jurisdictions. So we worship with somewhat different traditions and in different languages. And I think it's wonderful if we can all get to know each other across those jurisdictions and see if we can't build a little more familiarity with one another. So I'm excited to be here. And this week, again, we have an amazing guest. I think you're really going to enjoy it. I want you to take down the number in case you want to call in and join this conversation. The number is 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. And Bobby Maddox is right here engineering the program. He's taking your calls. Our chat room is open, as always, at ancientfaith.com/radio/live. So there are lots of ways for you to join in, and you're welcome to join us as we sit here and talk. But I don't want to postpone anymore. Let's get straight to our guest, Alexa Lozachuk. And I might be saying your name wrong. Alexa, real quick, is it Lozachuk? I am going to go with Lozochuk. But so Alexa is a Canadian Academy nominee, and he's also an award-winning music composer. He's a music producer, a music director, a supervisor. You're getting the feeling, right? A multi-instrumentalist. He is a very, very talented and musical person, clearly. And he's recognized internationally for all sorts of works he's done on different scores, on different music. He's actually worked not only with like big orchestras, but also with clients like Apple and Disney and McDonald's and Microsoft. And so, advertising and then background things and all the different places that we need music in our beautiful digital world. He's all over all of those places. So at any rate, though, we're going to talk about his career a bit. I also want to hear about, his life and find out. I want to get to know you. So Alexa, welcome to the program. Alexa, oh no, I think we might have gotten disconnected. There's a chance that our connection is not good, but I think he's
okay now?
There you are. Fantastic. I was going to say, gosh, I would hate it if we lost you. Fantastic. Welcome back. Welcome back, Alexa.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound perfect.
Okay, great.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to the program, Alexa. I was just talking about you and your very impressive resume. But before we get to this wonderful career that you are having, let me know, how did things start out for you? Where did you grow up? What's your story?
Sure. I grew up in a town called Dauphin, Manitoba. It was in the middle of the prairies in Canada. Lived there for about, just for 2 years, I think. And then my parents moved to Regina, Saskatchewan, which is just the neighboring province over, still in the prairies. Grew up there, stayed there, for high school, elementary school, high school, did my undergrad there. Life was pretty simple. It wasn't a farm town. It was in the city of Regina, but it was, first language was Ukrainian growing up because my parents wanted us to learn Ukrainian because there was a really strong family connection and still lots of family back in Ukraine. I'm third generation Ukrainian or second generation, can't remember, but my parents were born in Canada and essentially, grew up, spoke Ukrainian first, then went to French immersion school, and that was our second language. So then I kind of learned English on the playground and eventually, became main language and stuff. But grew up, had a really decent childhood. Was there. I have two siblings that are older than me, brother Markian and sister Larissa. So they're 2 years and 4 years older than me.
So when you
did
say
what other kids did, I was really involved in sports. Go ahead.
Oh, excellent. I was just going to say, when you say on the prairies, like, are you talking about Chicago's on a prairie and then there are lots of little towns. Was it like a big city? What is the town like where you were?
It was a city of probably about 170,000 people at the time growing up. So It was the capital of the province there. And so for us, it was kind of the big city, right? Whereas other friends or other people were from farms of, 10 people to a couple hundred people. But yeah, it was the main city in the province. I just brought that up just because the prairies is kind of, if you grow up there, it's, beautiful skies, beautiful sunsets and all that kind of stuff, but there's not a whole lot to do. You can literally, get in your car and you drive straight. And for 10 hours, you don't have to move the steering wheel. It's like, there's no mountains, but it's very, and so, in a similar way, how Ukraine was kind of a breadbasket for a lot of Europe, Saskatchewan was, known as a breadbasket for a lot of the world as well. So lots of canola fields, wheat fields, barley fields, all that kind of stuff around you. That was more of when you'd go for a ride outside of the city, you would see that, or if you had grandparents that had a farm, then you would be exposed to that. For the most part, it was more of kind of like a suburban lifestyle, I guess, in some ways, because we had a downtown core, but it wasn't really the same as, larger metropolitan centers like Toronto or Montreal, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's still it's a city of good size for sure, though. But I know what you mean. But so
it's great.
So out of curiosity, you mentioned that Ukraine is also kind of the breadbasket, and you have the same kind of topography. Do you think that's why your family or other Ukrainian immigrants ended up in that area? Were they like attracted to come to the same sort of thing and get back to work? Like, was your family farming at all?
Yeah, I mean, there were artisans in the Carpathian Mountains in Ukraine, a lot of them. And that being said, there was free land here in Canada, and a lot of the Ukrainians settled in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba. So I'm not sure if it was the topography as much as that's where they were given the land to go. But
when you say free land, how did that work? What is what?
I'm not an expert historian, but as far as I remember, basically, as far as I remember, there was, advertisements. I don't know how it worked, intergovernmental stuff, but basically, Canada was trying to populate a lot of its land by bringing people from all around the world. As far as I remember, there, again, don't quote me on this, but it would be kind of like, hey, come to a land, develop it, and you get whatever 50 acres for, to develop. Each family gets this, or whatever parcel of land it was that you were given. They were trying to draw on people from all different countries to come essentially and populate this vast territory that was kind of really raw and had to be, so when my grandparents came, they knew no English, they knew nobody, and essentially had to lean on each other and people within their community that came over as immigrants, a lot of times not even Ukrainians, other immigrants from other countries, and had to kind of band together and, like most immigrant stories, till the land, figure out how to make it, and then hopefully first generation or second generation would acclimatize and then kind of plant roots for the future,
Isn't that lovely? It's like a combination of a story of like the pioneers and the pioneer days, and also European immigrants and trying to just figure out what it's like to live in Canada and what, learn the language and get used to the new systems and all of that. Was there a Ukrainian church then? Were your grandparents?
There was.
Helping to develop something like that? Oh, okay. What is
well, on my I can't remember if it's my mom's side or my dad's side, but one of the grandfathers or the great grandfathers was actually built. I don't know if it was like 30 or 40 churches, all within the prairie. So those Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. A lot of Orthodox churches were built by him. And so, because nobody knew how to build cupolas or the domes essentially, or how to do things. And they had a lot of history knowing how to build that in Ukraine and that kind of knowledge of how to build a proper Orthodox church. And so, it's interesting. My brother was just sharing with me this last year a bunch of pictures of churches all across the prairies, and it's like, here's another one that was built by our great grandfather or great uncle. I can't remember which one it was, but so there was definitely a connection to the church growing up. We grew up in Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Regina. That was kind of our main church. Baptized, chrismated. Went to communion. Was an altar boy growing up. And, it was a very rich experience. We had a really strong Ukrainian community, so there was a lot of cultural connection there too, through the music and the dance and other things. But I also remember growing up, like, at Christmas time, my parents would like put hay underneath the table for the, leading up to the feast.
That's right. Isn't that beautiful? I think a lot of people, a lot of American and Canadian Orthodox people might not be familiar with that. In the Slavic traditions, I know the Serbs too, I assume all of the Slavic traditions, but you always have hay in the church at the Nativity and in your home because it's the manger, right? I assume that's what it is, right? Because you're... Yep. Yeah, it's so beautiful.
You would leave a chair open for the stranger that might pass through the night, right? Or... we the Ukrainians, I don't know about the Serbs, but the Ukrainians would also have your Christmas, as you're preparing for the Nativity feast, you have your 12-course, non-animal, non-dairy meal, right, leading up. And so there's all kinds of traditions that were, it was interesting because growing up, I went to a Roman Catholic school. And so we were kind of some of it was familiar, but it was also a little different because we were kind of the minority. There wasn't many Orthodox at the school at the same time. So it was interesting. Sometimes our church calendars would align, and other times they wouldn't, or we'd have certain traditions that were different and stuff. But overall, it was a very positive childhood.
Oh, that's really neat. Sometimes in families where you grow up with so much of the ethnic tradition and the religious tradition, you'll hear people say that like one was emphasized over the other. It sounds like in your family, the two were really married together very nicely, and that it sounds like you didn't feel like you missed out on either of them. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. It was. I mean, the faith was very real for my grandparents and for my parents. It played itself out in different ways.
Sure.
So for example, in my case, I didn't marry somebody that was Ukrainian. And so in our home, it's taken on a different shape and form because, we haven't dived super deep into our Ukrainian heritage or my Ukrainian heritage. It's been much more of a, my connection to the church is more, my wife is English speaking and our kids are English speaking, and so the depth of connection is not necessarily through the culture. It's really as a faith community. But that being said, there's something about growing up and experiencing those things, particularly in childhood and at those key moments of, adolescence where, your emotions are connected with pivotal tentpole moments in your life, whether that's Pascha or whether that's, a panacheda or like a singing memory eternal at the, at your open casket for your grandparents that died. Like I ended up going on and doing an undergrad in film. And one of my projects, actually, of my third year, ended writing a song for in kind of as an homage to my grandparents and their life and their struggle. And my brother and I filmed their funeral. Like they died about 2 weeks apart. On my dad's side, my grandparents. And so the priest and everybody let us bring our film cameras and whatnot, and we kind of recorded the whole experience. And then you don't realize it when you're going through the footage afterwards and going through everything. It's like all of these, lighting the candles, giving a kiss to the departed, and all of these different things that you kind of take for granted when you go through your own footage with your own family and your own connection. You realize that these things are quite embedded in you because they've been with you at every stage of your life. So that's been a really interesting thing. So to come back to your question of was it more cultural or more spiritual? I would say I'm grateful for what I had, and it left an indelible mark on me.
That's beautiful. That's excellent. Well, and it is amazing, just I think sometimes when we're growing up or when people are growing up with the Orthodox faith, as you say, you don't see it as clearly until you start to grow up and out, or even as you did, like get real perspective on it by filming it and being able to step back and really literally watch it. But our funeral services are really very beautiful. I actually know someone who converted because she wanted to have an Orthodox funeral. Like she was married to an Orthodox man, and she had never converted. And one day we were at a funeral, and I said, it's weird that you won't have a funeral like this. And she was like, what do you mean? So you have to be chrismated if you want this funeral. She got chrismated right away. She was like, wow. But it's a beautiful service. That's neat. Now, when you made this film and you were able to show that service, I guess, to some of your classmates who were working on it with you, to your professor, how did they receive it?
I mean, it was a very emotional song and film. So I think they received it. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know. Things touch people in different ways. I think it was received okay because it wasn't a piece of preaching anything. Right. It was really just capturing a moment that was showing grief, but it wasn't, it's like we talk about our bright sadness or our, there's not a heaviness, but what was, I don't know, for me, what was, and one thing that I've really, appreciated about our faith is that we kind of live in a society where there's not a lot of outlets for grief, and communally, grieving together. Historically, you know, people would grieve together and be able to mourn, and we'd have the deceased body in the home for a week or whatever it was, and we'd have a chance to really acknowledge and be connected to that person, and whether they were alive or not, they were still a member of the family. Whereas I feel like a lot of our modern day life and society, particularly in North America, has kind of whitewashed away that connection that we have, and it's kind of it's almost like we live in silos, where it's like we drive in our cars with our windows up. We don't necessarily talk to the person in the next car over, or we walk with our heads down because we've got to get somewhere. And so there's not a lot of moments in our life that cause us to step back and see the connection that we have with each other as human beings. And I felt like, in that case, the funeral for me was a chance to step back and reflect personally. But I think funerals in general, and Orthodox funerals, are really powerful that way, because they don't shy away from anything.
Yes.
The body is the body, and it's a sacred thing, and it's a holy thing. But it's also like you realize, like, we don't know how to express our love, even though they've gone through the veil, and we don't know exactly where they are, but we do know that we still love them, and we are having a hard time letting them go, and that we hope that one day we might be reunited with them again. But it's I don't know, it's like a confluence of what it means to be a human. There's like I said, there's a sadness and a grief because of all the memories that we have, but there's also this lightness of being, because there is a deep love between us, and with all those who are there and witness it as well, that there's, in our case as Orthodox Christians, we believe it's the love of Christ that is among us, and the light of Christ that is among us, and that gives us hope, that we hold on to.
Absolutely. I absolutely love how you're saying that. I think it really is true that our culture, certainly here in North America, I don't know about Europe, possibly the same, but we really do push down all thought of death. We push away the reality of death. We cremate someone, we have a celebration of life. We try to focus on how they lived and not talk about how they've died now. And unfortunately, in the Christian life, that really takes something away, because the real profound beauty of the Christian life is the fact that Christ trampled down death. And if you can't see death, then what did he trample down? It doesn't seem as impressive anymore. We have to touch it a bit, I think, and really face it. But I think it's very lovely how you talk. Now, you've brought up a few times this phrase, bright sadness. And I noticed in your bio that you have won awards for a song named Bright Sadness. Is that right?
It was actually for a chamber album that I had written, a chamber composition called Bright Sadness back in 2003. It was just after 9/11 at the time, and we were kind of processing what had gone on with the crashing of the Twin Towers, and at the time, I didn't know how to express. I had just finished. I had done a master's in cinema, so I'd done my bachelor's of filmmaking, and then gone on to do a master's. And at the time, I wanted a way to express kind of this maelstrom of emotion, and at the same time wanting to connect universally with other people. And so I basically started, I had written a lament for the forgotten, basically. And I had kind of done a demo with my brother-in-law, Blair Lofgren, he's a principal cellist at the Quebec Symphony. I had written this lament for him, and it was kind of a piece of a larger work that eventually became Bright Sadness. And so it was part of we lived in Montreal. So after we left Regina, my wife and I did my master's in Montreal, and we stayed there for about 9 years. And so during that time there, we ended up going to an Antiochian parish called St. George, which was just a wonderful community there with all kinds of Arab Christians, Lebanese, a whole, not just Lebanese, but a whole from a bunch of different countries that had their, Syro-Lebanese community. But we also had a bunch of Slavs there as well, and a bunch of Quebecois and English people as well. So it was a unique church experience for us because we were very welcomed. Father Anthony Gabriel, who was the pastor and priest at the time. They welcomed us with open arms, and we were kind of adopted into this Syro-Lebanese community, even though we weren't Syro-Lebanese. And what was kind of cool is, so they had, and this all will tie back to Bryce Sadness, but the context was we became part of the community before 9/11, and it was different for us because I had grown up, used to, Orthodox sacred choral music and singing within church, or chanting, was still pretty much within the Ukrainian or the Slavic tradition, or the Carpatho tradition.
Yes.
Whereas coming to this experience, it was completely different. It was, Syro-Lebanese chant, it was Byzantine chant, it was, a mixture of stuff, and also the choral master, the choir conductor that had been there kind of earlier on, when the first church started. He had come from a Slavic background, but he ended up harmonizing a lot of the Syro-Lebanese chants and hymns and stuff. And so it was this amazing mixture for us where we kind of felt welcome because, they welcomed us, but we, musically speaking, we felt at home because there was a similarity to the Slavic, harmonizations and chants. But then there was this whole other dimension, which was the Byzantine chant and then the Syro-Byzantine chant. And
that's neat.
It was just,
that is really neat.
It was very rich for us. So what ended up happening is when 9/11 happened and I needed to write something, I wrote this Lament for the Forgotten. And then it became the first work. I ended up getting a Canada Council grant to flesh it out and really create a full, 40-minute piece for solo cello, string quintet, mixed choir, a bunch of Ukrainian wooden flutes that I play called sopilkas and stuff. And so I wrote this larger work, and we ended up getting a bunch of grants for it, made a recording out of it, and it kind of was, again, a tentpole experience for my wife and I and my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law and other people that were involved because they were all musicians, but it was in this larger community, an Orthodox experience for us in Montreal, where we had people from all different cultures, all different languages, and not everybody agreed and saw the world the same way, but it was something where there was still love and communion and peace among us, and that was a really awesome experience for us in our lives. Like when we look back at it, we had our first 2 kids when we were there as well, so it was a really special time in our life.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's very beautiful. Now, is it possible if we wanted to hear this? Is that available somewhere that we could?
Yeah, it's on Spotify, on Apple Music, all those kind of things. Stuff I've shared with John and Bobby over the years. I think at some point as well.
I'm sure.
But yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's really neat. That's very neat. So you're mentioning you keep bringing up your brother-in-law, your sister-in-law, your wife. Is everyone a musician in the family? Is this both? Yeah, are both of your families really musical?
Yeah, they are. My wife was a jazz singer and she played violin. Her mom is a music teacher. My mom is a music teacher. Her brother plays cello. My brother played stand-up bass. My sister played piano and flute. And we come from families of artists and stuff. It's funny because we went to this Lebanese church, and most of them are in textiles or in business and other stuff. And we're like, no, we're a bunch of artists coming. It was pretty funny. But that's my family is a mixture of kind of artists and political scientists and sociologists.
Okay. So do you feel like it was important that you found a spouse who is also a musician? Do you speak being a person who's not musical, you don't have a magical music language that you could never have lived without? No?
No, actually, it's funny. My wife and I, we have a long connection. So she actually sang. So remember that film that I made with my grandparents called Our Land? I wrote the song and she sang with me on it in Ukrainian, even though she didn't understand the lyrics in Ukrainian and stuff. So we've had a really strong connection musically over the years. But it's, to be honest with you, as we get older, it's like, and even my kids, like they play instruments and stuff, but I have enough music and they see my life as an artist and creator enough that they're like, you do your thing.
Yeah.
We prefer sports and keeping that separate, so. Which is good.
Well, that makes sense.
Me balance. I don't take myself too seriously, and it's a good balance that way.
Well, it is, and it's good. Then your life is not all music, but then you've got to go like to the soccer game or whatever. So it's probably a good thing in the long run. Well, so
exactly.
we are going to go for a short break, Alexa, and I can't wait to be back. We'll be back in a minute or two with more from Alexa, and I'm really looking forward to this. Thanks so much. We'll be right back. Or maybe we won't. We might not go to break at all. We don't have to go to break. I mean, I don't really care, honestly. Sometimes Ancient Faith likes to play these ads for other Ancient Faith shows, but I mean, we could just advertise this show. We could be like, you know what, guys? Next Sunday, come right back. We'll have another great show. The end. Excellent. So if you want to call in, you're welcome to do so. It's 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. The chat room is, I don't know if it's really open. It's probably open. Ancient Faith/radio/live. But so now we're talking about your wife, and you were saying that she was singing with you for this film. How did you guys meet in the first? Is that how you met initially? Did you like hire her to do some vocals, or how did you know each other?
What's funny is we going through our childhood, because she grew up in Regina as well, and we were going through some of our old childhood, memorabilia and stuff, and sure enough, we brought out a page from our. I think it was we were 3 years old. And we were in the same Suzuki violin class together. We didn't know this, but we looked at the name of, and because it was a small city and not a lot of people, played string instruments and stuff. So I guess we knew each other when we were 3 years old, but we really didn't connect until high school. And we had done, again, I think I had brought, we had mutual friends. I knew her brother, Blair, the cellist. We used to play pool at like a local billiards hall somewhere and stuff together. But, we didn't really know each other at that point. And then we got to know each other. And then as I got to know her and the family, they would ask me to help write, arrange some jazz arrangements. They had a family quartet that would play at different funerals or not funerals, but weddings and other things like that. And sometimes do Christmas concerts. So I did some arranging for them. And then Kara and I, my wife, Kara, we did a bunch of different recordings together for different things. Same thing with her brother, Blair. So we kind of, over the years, we just, through music and through friendship, ended up getting to know each other more. And then, ended up dating afterwards, and once we headed into university, and then got engaged.
How lovely. All right, so you both went to university in the same place at the same time?
We did. She is a teacher, so she did her education degree there. I did my film degree, and then I ended up going off to first year in Montreal on my own to start my master's while she finished up her education degree, and then we got married, and then we both moved back to Montreal, and then we were there, had our first two kids, Kolya, who's 16, turning 17 now, and then Julita, who is 14 going on 15, and then in Montreal for about 9 years, and then made our way to Vancouver, where we are right now, or in the township of Langley, just outside of Vancouver. And we had our third child, Jovan, who's 12, about to turn 13.
Lovely. Oh, that's great. So how do you like, so Langley, are there Orthodox churches around? What is the Orthodox, I'm more familiar, honestly, with Orthodox churches on the eastern side of Canada.
Sure.
Are there a lot of Orthodox churches on the western side as well in British Columbia?
I don't know if I don't even know what the number of churches is. There's a strong presence here. So our church literally is 2 blocks away from our house. So we go to Holy Nativity Antiochian Orthodox Church, which is the priestess, Father Michael Gillis. So he is, he's actually on Ancient Faith Radio.
I was going to say, I know that name.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah, so he's a wonderful priest. He came, him and his wife Korea Bonnie Matushka Bonnie came from California. They weren't part of the Ben Lomond whole California experience, but they were from Santa Barbara area and stuff, and eventually made their way up here. And so we've been.
We actually have a lot of ancient faith people in the Santa Barbara Antiochian Church. Actually, Jane Meyer, Kevin Allen of blessed memory was there.
Yeah,
may his memory be eternal. But that's really neat. Okay, all right. So your priest then is what? Go.
No, I was just going to say. So we are really fortunate. We live very close to it. My sister-in-law, Tammy, and her husband, Scott, and our 4 godchildren live 5 minutes away from us as well. So it's kind of like, not a little home on the prairie, but it's we're very fortunate that way where our church is
That's beautiful. Now, was that intentional? I mean, did you buy a house 2 blocks away from a church, or did you buy a house and then say, wow, we're so lucky there's a church right there?
Well, we originally, the church was meeting in a barn. One of the founding families had basically, the church it was a mission parish for the longest time. And actually Metropolitan Joseph was Bishop Joseph then. And so it was a mission parish that they had sent out Father Michael up north from the States to essentially become the priest. At the time, for many years, we were meeting in a barn that was converted into a church with a little iconostas and, a small area probably for about 30 people, maybe.
Wow. Out of curiosity, how cold is it in Vancouver in a barn in the winter? Is that?
It's not that bad, actually. What's cold is when you got to take your 2-year-old to go to the washroom in the middle of the liturgy. That's when it's cold, right? So
there you go. Yeah, I grew up near San Francisco, which is a lot like Vancouver, but much further south, and it's cold in the winter already. I don't know.
Yeah, it's humid. I was used to the dryness of the prairies, whereas moving out to the coast here, when it's cold, it's more that it chills you to the bones. It's not that it's super cold. It's just it's very damp and very humid and stuff. So
yeah,
I agree. We were in a barn, and then we made our way. There was an old Romanian parish, essentially. I think at the time was an old OCA community, and then eventually it was. I think it was the St. Nicholas was the name of the community. I can't remember, but long and short of it was that community kind of amalgamated with our community, and then that church was essentially kind of transferred over to the Antiochian Archdiocese, and then that became our home. And so we've kind of been growing there at that church. We've repaired things and kind of grown. There's been a lot of young families and people from all different kinds of backgrounds that have joined us slowly, and it's kind of growing. It's a mixture of young and middle and old. So there's a wide range of different, people.
That's lovely. Often we'll say things like, oh, the parish is full of young families. And it's a wonderful thing, right? Because it means that, the parish is going to be replenished as all those young people grow older. But it really is a blessing, isn't it? To have all of the different generations represented and to have that interaction. I think that makes for the best parishes.
It is. I mean, it's a smaller parish too, which is nice because you kind of know everybody and you know people by name. In Montreal, it was a cathedral and you knew people, but it was just it's just a different dynamic that you have, right? So it's been a blessing for us for sure.
Yeah, it can be very sweet to raise your kids in a small enough community that, everyone there feels like an aunt or an uncle or a cousin or something. It's like having a huge family. A small church is like a big family.
No, that's exactly. And my kids literally call, other people, uncles and aunts, even though they're biologically not that, and they're not even their godparents. There's a lot of, close relationships that we have within the church community that they don't know how to call them anything but that because there's deep bonds there, which is great, right? Like as we head into having teenagers now, our challenge is our church has a lot of really young people and not a lot of people my kids' age, and so that's been definitely a challenge. Like even my kids are like, there's nobody for me to marry, you know, like where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And it's tough. It's I don't know how you guys manage it, but on our side, my wife and I are, you know, it's a struggle for sure of trying to, on the one hand, not be ungrateful for the community that we have, but at the same time recognize that our kids are facing a world that is completely different than we grew up with, and they're going to need all the support they have, and you know, for us to have the expectations for them to find that, you know, perfect spouse within this tiny community is you know, highly unlikely, right? So,
well, you know, we're in a smallish.
We'll
I'm in a smallish church, and my kids I have 3 teenagers. And when I had said, you know, I was like, wow, you know, there are actually a lot of kids your age and a lot of nice boys. And, you know, who knows, maybe you'll end up marrying one of them. They were all horrified because they were like, we grew up with these guys. Like, these are my brothers, my cousins. Like, that's disgusting. That's a terrible idea. So I think they all kind of immediately were like, no. I'll travel, you know, I'll go to college somewhere else. I'll go to church there. There'll be some great guy there. Don't worry about it. But please don't ask me to marry somebody I grew up with in church. So maybe it works out in the end. It may be that even if you had a bunch of kids the same age, they would be completely grossed out by the idea of perhaps marrying one of them.
I agree. 100%.
But what's lovely, though, is that while they don't have kids their age necessarily to hang out with, they have all of these other adults that are not their parents that they're connected to. And it's so important. You know, there are studies saying that people who stay in the church, a couple of the things that go on for them, one is that their parents are very faithful, and you can see that their parents really mean it and they're sincere. And then the other thing is they're connected to other adults in the faith. And so, like, if they have a question, they can go to one of them. Like, is it that kind of relationship, would you say, where, you know, your kids could call somebody else in the parish and be like, look, I have a problem. I don't want to tell my dad about it. You know?
Yeah, we've actually had those situations where we tell our kids, like, we're like, hey, like, you don't have to talk to us. Like, you know, clearly there's, you know, let's just say there's an issue going on. We're able to just say, hey, look, it doesn't matter who you talk to. Like, obviously you can reach out to your uncles and aunts or other people that you're comfortable with, but our thing is just, you know, talk to somebody, at least have somebody you're accountable to or transparent with, or that you can just feel completely accepted for who you are, because obviously we're your parents and, you know, we're biased and or we'll, you know, mess things up. So that's been helpful. We don't, you know, at our church, we have some people that are really, you know, quite a bit older, but we don't have a lot of, you know, I want to be disrespectful, but we don't have a lot of really elderly people. And so what we have are people who kind of are on their way to more towards their retirement. And so they're still young enough that our kids feel like they can, you know, look up to them professionally, let's say, you know, if they're older ones that are looking to get into the workforce or whatnot. So that's been really good. And, you know, thankfully my wife's parents live about an hour away. And so they come in once a week, and so there's still a connection with their grandparents and that generation and stuff. So yeah, it's been positive for sure.
It's funny. I'm really struck by that idea that people with kids often think, I want to parish with a lot of young families. And it's like, well, you know, some young families is really good, but you got to have a lot of everybody. You know, you have to have that wonderful mix, because it works out so well. So, okay,
and
so you've moved.
It does take a village for sure, right?
It really does. It absolutely does. And it's such a blessing to have. The truth is, the kids are going to reach out to somebody. And better that it be someone who you know and you trust and you realize is, you know, they know you and they understand you. Because the truth is, sometimes, you know, it sounds like saying, oh, my kid's using drugs and he's not going to tell me about it, but he's going to tell them about it. Maybe. But it's also a lot of stuff like sometimes they're just mad at you. You know, sometimes it's just, they're just like, dad's just awful. So I can't talk to him about how awful he is. So that's really a blessing. That's beautiful. So now, is it, once you moved to British Columbia, is that when you founded this? Is it a business exactly? What would you call it? Interleave? Is that a business you would say?
No. So Interleave started about 2 years ago when we moved in 2006 to BC. I was in the film and TV industry in Montreal, writing music for film and doing sound. And then I had a friend who was working for Electronic Arts, which is one of the bigger video game companies that does a lot of sports games and stuff.
Yes.
And he said, "Hey, we're looking for, we're starting a new company. We don't have anybody that's doing audio. You should apply." And so the Vancouver Symphony had commissioned me to do an Olympic nugget. It was basically the Olympics were coming to Vancouver, and they commissioned a bunch of different composers to write pieces in honor of that. And so I was selected to write one, and it just happened to work out that when I came for the premiere for that, I was able to get an interview at this, and long story short, got offered the position. 2 months later, moved my family out, and we basically moved here. And have, I worked for that company, which was called Blue Castle Games, for I guess up until 2 years ago. So from 2006 until 2018, 17.
So you were scoring music for the games? Is that what you're doing? Like that?
No, the first 5 years was I just did sound, so audio, helping with audio direction, design. We were doing arcade baseball games for the Bigs and Bigs 1 and MLB 2K, which were kind of household baseball names for kids that liked, video games and sports. And then eventually they were commissioned by a Japanese company called Capcom. It's kind of a big Japanese company around for the last 35 years. And they had hired us to basically do the sequel for a big zombie franchise called Dead Rising. And at that time, I hadn't been doing any music in the studio. I was doing commissions for choirs and ensembles and stuff on the side, but nobody really knew in the studio that I did music or had a music career as well. And the CEO did know, and he basically asked me to write a music suite for this game when the game creator came over, and they really liked what I did, and essentially from that day forward, I became the main composer and eventually the music director for the studio. So I spent many, many years working on zombie games and other arcade games and other things with Capcom. And then 2 years ago, I decided to, that it was time to branch out and start something on my own. And so I left and started a new company called Interleaf with a business partner in Toronto. And that, what we do is essentially similar, but a lot broader. So we do music, sound design, voice direction, audio design. We even developed for video games, for interactive, for virtual reality games, for console games like the Xbox or the PS5. We score music for films and TV. So we're starting up our next season with for Disney Channel's big show Gabby Duran. Did the score for that, do feature films, so kind of a wide range of stuff. We even are developing some of our own music making apps within virtual reality and stuff like that. So but what's cool is we're able to we're really interested in people first, and then process, and then projects. And so we've really tailored the company to try to find people that we really want to work with. And because eventually, we only have so many years left, and we want to make sure that we're working on projects that mean something to us, and still world class, or have a reach that will, touch a lot of people. But we want to be working on things that at least eventually that we can get back. I'd love to get back to making, films again and things like that. But raising a family, it made more sense for me to use my gifts of making music to apply it to the kind of the entertainment industry and whatnot.
Wow. As you're talking, I can't help but think of all the kids out there who want to go get music degrees, and their parents are very nervous that there's no work for them. And it's like, everybody wants to be an engineer so they can go do high-tech work. There's room for a lot of creativity in high-tech work. You've mentioned Blue Castle and Electronic Arts. They employ all kinds of artists and musicians and all sorts of beautiful stuff. And I think people don't think about that much. But do you see yourself as a musician first, or do you see yourself as a filmmaker first? Or at this point, are you like a filmmaker who's working in music? How would you characterize it?
I would say I've pretty much I've always been you know, music. Even when I made films, they were musical films, really. But I mean, I don't know. I honestly, I think of myself more as a creator and an improviser. You know, because I've had to use my skill set for, you know, like one of my gifts is I'm able to just make things up right on the spot, and just be able to improvise and to kind of orchestrate and improvise and create things on the fly. And so, but in certain contexts, I'm not able to do that with music, right? So in some cases, I'm in a really sticky, tricky situation with different people and different dynamics where, people are at odds with each other and we have to hit a creative deadline and whatnot. And so in that sense, I still have to leverage my gifts. I'm improvising and I'm creating and I'm rechanneling and I'm using dynamics in a different way. So I might use musical language or creative language or filmmaking language, but it might apply to relationships, or it might apply to, raising my kids, or it might apply to something else. I see it less as like a narrow siloed experience. And I see it more as just, I operate with energy, and that energy takes on different forms. Sometimes it's visual, sometimes it's oral, sometimes it's relational. And I would say that's kind of what I see my role being, and what I try to focus on is how am I harnessing the energy, i.e. gifts that I have and talents, but also the relationships and my emotional intelligence, and how do I take that and harness it for good, to leave things better than they were. Like, so in the case of making zombie games, it wasn't my preferred genre, but I had to engage with it and try to inject as much life and beauty and goodness as I could into it. And sometimes that meant really going dark places and exploring those things, because that's, it's like Solzhenitsyn says, there's the dividing line is in between, in every human heart, right? Between good and
That's
evil.
right.
And I can't speak to only good all the time. I have to be able to know and understand like that evil and that propensity towards darkness is just as much as in me as anybody else or externally. And I can't do that unless I'm willing to actually, like we were talking earlier, to encounter death, right? Not physically, but at least to deal with things which remind me of my death, and conversely, things which remind me of life and that kind of thing. So I've really tried to. You don't always have that luxury, but I've tried to, when I can, always bring it back to, I tried to pare it down to life, death, and beauty. Personally, that's kind of something that I've really tried to hone in of what was important to me. And whether that takes on musical form, it doesn't really matter, as long as I'm able to do something positive with the energy that I have left in me.
That is a very beautiful way to see it. And I think in that sense, it's a very productive and fruitful way to see it, because then if you're just a person with wonderful creative and relational energy, you can use that with whatever comes. And then it's not so much, oh, I need this thing to come. It's okay, well, what will come and how will I respond to it? And I think, do you feel like your philosophy is coming from orthodoxy, or do you feel like does it come from your education? Is it somewhere else? I think it's certainly compatible with orthodoxy. Do you think that that's related to your spirituality?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. There's no prescription within, as you know, within our faith, there's, every person has to run their own race, right?
Yes. And there's room for a lot of different kinds of being Orthodox, right? Like there are so many unique human beings, and we can all live out this exact same faith, but in totally different ways. But I think it's interesting to see how this takes shape in you. I think it's very beautiful. It's very interesting. Do you feel like you're largely, the way that you think about yourself and about your career is really very much fed by your Orthodox spirituality?
Yeah, I would say so. Probably more and more. And I would say probably as I age and as I've encountered more hurdles or pain or things in life, which, it's funny, when you're younger, you think you have some semblance of control over your life, or what happens to you, what you can do. And there's a degree of truth to it in the sense that you can nudge things a certain direction. But as I get older, and as I'm sure all of us can see with the world, with COVID and other things like that, like, we are so frail and so, we are, it's like Arvo Pärt said, we're realizing we are one organism, right? And it's like the butterfly wings, fluttering in Japan literally will create a tsunami over here eventually. And there's an interconnectedness between us, which I think we're becoming aware of more and more now, because the stakes are so high that we're not, like, it's just becoming so glaringly obvious that we are so interconnected. And for me, as I've had challenges throughout my life in different areas, I've realized that I'm not smart enough, I'm not wise enough, I don't have the strength often to surmount the challenges that come before me. And I've realized, the wisdom within the faith, and I would say it's not just the Orthodox faith, but just universally amongst people, is that there's this recognition that, ultimately we are human. Like, we're not gods, we can't do everything ourselves. And so for me, I was brought up Orthodox. I did veer away in kind of in high school and early kind of university a bit, exploring other forms of Christianity. I've never veered outside of that, but I didn't have to. I felt like when I came back in my early 20s, I sensed that, even though I went on a journey, was experimenting with different things, I was able to come back, and I ended up finding that everything I needed was at home, that there was depth to what it, like, there was a real deep understanding of humanity, what it means to be human. There's a real depth to understanding suffering and what suffering means, like, and there's a real depth to understanding, like, how to transform that death and suffering into something that could be truly transformative. And on earth, you could actually see, like, generations be affected by it for good for a long time, and that, yes. Why would you walk away from something, in a sense, been empirically and scientifically kind of proven by virtue of just, more saints or more people having more love and loving others and showing more mercy? Like, why would I walk away from that?
Isn't that, and yet you did for a little while, right? In your youth. Sometimes I think we can't see that until we step back enough to get the perspective to be like, to appreciate what's there, because we, when we're young, we kind of assume that the grass is always greener and, everything's going great everywhere else. And then you walk around, you go, oh, okay, well, they have something good going, but what I had back there was really good.
Well, and to be honest with you, I think some of it is, like, even if you, for me at least, because I can only speak about my own experience, but I feel that that's where the difference is like, particularly with pain and suffering, and with either losing loved ones or having, real, whether it's health issues or whether it's like relational issues. I found that in the same way that music for me was a conduit to healing, I feel that the depth of our lived experience within the Orthodox faith, it really, addresses, my psychological needs as a human being. It addresses my spiritual needs as a human being, and it helps me kind of stay on it's a narrow path, and I'm not, like, I am not the example of what it means to be an Orthodox Christian, but I can honestly say that it's like I don't think, except for like maybe some, like if I became too zealous and too ultra Orthodox in my thinking, whereas like that I don't, rather than my heart growing warmer and wider and loving more people, that it becomes narrower. Besides that temptation, I would say it's like there's so many more steps for me to grow, but it's okay because I just, as long as I focus on growing a little, like an inch today, a little bigger inch tomorrow, and then my heart hopefully grows wider and warmer, so that eventually, on my deathbed, I can look back and hopefully I've been transformed enough to have become who I was meant to be, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's very beautiful. And I will say, before we go, I want to let you know that there are a lot of parents listening today who are feeling so much better because they're hearing you say, it's possible to walk away for a little while and then to come back and really see the depth and the beauty and the profundity of the faith in a new way, and in a way that, where you're just so attached to it that you can't imagine ever walking away. And also that, one can be a creative person and have an interesting and varied and wonderful career. And it's just really wonderful to be able to talk to you, Alexa. I've really enjoyed it. And, one of these days when you have a project that you need to promote, come on the program and tell us all about it. We would love to keep up with what you're doing over the years.
I would love to. It was great, and keep up the great work. Cheers to Bobby and the rest, John and the rest of the crew, and to yourself. You guys are doing great work.
Thank you, and thank God for Ancient Faith Radio. I'm so excited to be around these people. They're so cool. But thank you so much, Alexa. I so appreciate you coming on the program, and thank you to our audience for joining us again to meet another wonderful Everyday Orthodox person. And coming up, we have Father Evan Armatas. We'll be right back.